Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Amma ba'd. Jazakallah khair for Brother Abdul Hay. Do you want to put the presentation up, inshallah, and then we'll go through it slide by slide, inshallah. Just before we do go straight into it, can everyone hear me well? Can everyone hear me clearly? Jazakallah khair. If you do have any questions, so just type it into the chat, and inshallah, if we've got time, we'll pick it up towards the end. If not, we'll pick something up offline, inshallah. Just to give everyone a gist, so this is a formal webinar. It is a platform to educate, to discuss. There's a lot of theory behind it, a lot of information involved. But what I will say to everybody is do chip in as and when we do ask questions through the chat. But also, I'm going to try and make it a bit interactive. So we'll throw questions at you, and you get your answers down, and then inshallah we'll come back and check it together. Approximately about 45 minutes time, just before we do the Mythbuster. There's a session we're on called Mythbuster. We're going to go for a little comfort break, 7-8 minutes, and then inshallah we'll come back. Just conscious that obviously Salatul Asr, so we don't want to go on too long. So I'm going to go straight into it. First and foremost, just a couple of disclaimers from me, is that this topic of Ahlul Bayt, we're going to look at it from a Sunni perspective, because whenever we hear Karbala, Muharram, Ahlul Bayt, we always think about Hussein radiallahu anhu, and no doubt, the heart-wrenching incident that took place, the massacre took place, but there's also a lot more behind it, and inshallah today we're going to try and talk about that. So this is a very long and a drawn-out topic. So just again, first disclaimer from me is that this topic alone is quite controversial, and it has no doubt a lot of emotions, and it is possible to stoke the fans of hatred, the flames of anger between the Sunni and the Shia. But therefore, I want to state for the record very clearly that I am completely and totally opposed to stirring any bigotry, any hatred against any group. No doubt I am a Sunni, and I'm proud to be a Sunni, and I do disagree with the Shia theology and their interpretations of history. Yet this agreement that I have, and that many of us have, we should keep it, we should keep it civil, and it should never lead to violence or anger or any form of hatred. The second disclaimer is that this incident of Karbala is very detailed, and in fact, it's a significant part of our history. By its very nature, history in itself is very subjective, and there's always different variations and different motives being read in. And in this, short webinar, there is absolutely no way we can go into a detailed discussion or analysis. In fact, it take you 10 webinars just to cover the incident of Karbala alone. So it's going to be a touch and go on certain areas. It was quite aimed at, sort of intermediate to advanced, but conscious of many of the brothers and sisters joining. So try and keep it as simple as possible as well. But again, to give it its due, we can't just talk about it and not give the two versions. So we'll try our best. Disclaimer 3, just so that we know where the sources are and where it's come from. So I've used Ibn Hajar, Ibn Kathir, and these are sort of the versions that are agreed upon by the Sunni Muslims. There is another version, which is a popular version that the Shia use, and it comes from one particular person, and he's an early historian whose name was Abu Mikhnaf Lut ibn Yahya. Abu Mikhnaf Lut ibn Yahya. So again, if anyone's interested, to see the variations on both sides, and you want to study in the advance, that's someone to look at. And he died in the 157th Hijri. But he was the first historian who wrote about the massacre of Karbala, Maqtalu Karbala, and again, Maqtalu Hussein. And within that sort of version, it's full of lurid details, full of incidents that, allegedly took place. So from our perspective, we don't take that as an authoritative book, nor do we sort of take on the writer. But again, just so that everyone is clear that the references I've taken are pretty much from Ibn Hajar and also from Ibn Kathir. So first, before sort of do anything, I want to go into the sort of significance of Muharram, because this is all to do with sort of Muharram. So I said I'm going to skip through the intros because Brother Abdul Hay's done the intros, mashallah. So In terms of, okay, so just kind of go through the agenda. We're going to talk about Muharram and some significant history behind it, the do's and the don'ts. So again, I'll cover that in sort of in the session of what I call the Mythbuster to kind of bring people back to what reality, what it's really all about. Then we'll do the build up to Karbala. So what actually before the incident of Karbala, there are certain things that took place that historically is important for us to know. We'll do, although I've said a detailed discussion, but again, just conscious of time. So we'll pick on some of the aspects of that sort of incident of Karbala. Then we'll talk about the assassination of Hussein radiallahu anhu, and then some points because the incident alone, it's so it's massive. It took over months. So just some important points that we can think about, and then also lastly, what our stance is of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah as Sunnis, what our stance is. And so we look back into history and think about some of our elders and our Akabir and what they said about this, inshallah. So just moving on to sort of the history and the significance of Ashura. Prior to Islam, so this is us looking at sort of prior to Islam, the day of Ashura. So just a question here is which Islamic month is Muharram? So this is something that, like I said, we'll try and make it a bit interactive so you're taking something away. Just so these questions that have come up, what is the Islamic month? So is it the first month, second month? You should know, it's quite straight, easy. But again, anyone that doesn't know, um, write it down and inshallah we'll give the answers. Do remind me, Brother Abdul Hay, to give the answers as well at the end, inshallah. But yeah, as many of you are saying, it is the first month of Muharram. You're quite right. But also, it is from the four blessed months. So the end of the Islamic year ends with an Islamic blessed month, and it starts with the blessed month of Muharram is the first one. What is the significance of Muharram and Ashura? You don't need to answer this, but you do write it because at the end of it, the objective of today should really be if any of us do have this mindset that it is to do with Karbala, etc. So we'll be able to take away the significance of what Muharram and Ashura is. Then I want us to, again, if you don't know, then at least you should take away at the end of today who was Yazid, who was actually Yazid, and we're going to give his full name as well. Hussein, who was Hussein radiallahu anhu, who was he in sort of the significance of history, and then also who was Zainul Abidin, because that name does come up quite regularly in the seerah, in history, and especially around these incidents of Ahlul Bayt. So who was Zainul Abidin, inshallah. So keep these in mind, and as we go along, try and jot down the answers, inshallah. Next slide. So Ashura, and so look at the prior to Islam. So the day of Ashura, before Islam even came, the significance of Ashura was there. The Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam, they would observe the fasting on this day. Now, during the days of Jahiliyyah, the Quraysh would change the ghilaf, the cloth of the Kaaba on the day of Ashura, and they would observe fast on this day as well. So this is before Islam came. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would also kind of fast on the Ashura before the prophethood came. Now we look at sort of prior to Islam coming. Now, after migrating from Medina Munawwara, Rasulullah sallallahu when he came to Medina, he had witnessed that the Jews of Medina Munawwara were fasting on the day of Ashura. So Nabi sallallahu he asked them, what was the reason for their fasting, and they explained that it was on this day that Allah Azza wa Jalla, he saved Musa alayhi salam and Banu Israel from the dhulm and the oppression of Fir'aun and the people of Fir'aun, Al Fir'aun. And so Allah Ta'ala destroyed the army and Fir'aun on this day, on Ashura. So Musa alayhi salam, he observed to show his thankfulness, to show his gratitude to Allah Azza wa Jal. He observed his fast on this day out of the gratitude. And so Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he says that for us as Muslims, we are more worthy, we are more close to following the sunnah of Musa alayhi salam than the Jews themselves. And so that's the reason why he instructed us to fast on the 2 days. So the Jews were only fasting on one day, which was the 10th of Muharram, And so Rasulullah ﷺ advised us to fast 2 days. So the way we fast is we do 9 and 10, or we do 10 and 11, because we're more worthy of it. Then we look at, in sort of going back a bit more in history, in terms of Nuh alayhi salam, in the narration in Musnad ibn Ahmad, the Jews also explained to Rasulullah ﷺ when he had asked the question in Medina, that they said this was also the day on which Nuh alayhi salam, his ark, we know that he had to go on an ark, and the monsoon or the thunder that came and washed everything away. So this was the day that the actual ark had settled on Mount Judi. And so therefore Nuh alayhi salam also fasted on this day to show his gratitude towards Allah Azza wa Jalla. So subhanallah, we see a bit more history of, it's not just the fasting of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's a reason behind why it happened, and so it's not just Musa alayhi salam. The Jews also explain that this was also related to Nuh alayhi salam. So the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they fasted on Ashura, and they also encouraged the children to observe on this day. They used to, on this particular day of Ashura, and this is something for us, the reason why I bring this point is that it's for us to also encourage and involve our children in that process. We live at a time right now where everyone's busy with their lives, right? And we're working and the kids are in school, and we don't really have time for anything. We don't really have time. Back in the days, there was no gadgets. And so anything that used to happen, Eid, Ramadan, we'd really get involved with our kids. So this is something that the Sahaba did. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they'd make toys out of wool for their children. And if any child felt hungry during the fasting and they were crying for food, they would give them the toys to occupy them until the time of iftar. So it shows us that this fasting of Ashura, it was quite liked, not just the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and they encouraged it even with their children. Just on the point of the 2 days, so the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they mentioned to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the year before, so Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was fasting on one day, and what happened the year before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, they asked, "O Messenger of Allah, the day of Ashura is the day in which the Jews and the Christians, they hold this day in high esteem." So thereupon Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says that next year, because Rasulullah fasting on the 9th, he said that the next year, if Allah Ta'ala wills, that he will fast on 2 days, as in on Ashura. So he'll do the 10th, so he'll do the 9th and the 10th, or the 10th and the 11th. Sumu yawma, the hadith is in Musnad Ahmad, he says, Sumu yawma Ashura wa khalifu fihi al-yahud, sumu qablahu yawman or ba'dahu yawman. So the 9th, do 1 day before or 1 day after. And this is from, again, Musnad ibn Ahmad. So sometimes people question as well, right? So can I just fast on this 1 day? Because again, you might have medical reasons, you possibly work, you're flying, traveling, all those exceptions that come in place. It's important here that even if you do fast on the 1 day, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, because he fasted on the 1 day, but the preference is that we fast on the 2 days. So I just want to draw upon some of the lessons that come out of this. The first and the most important lesson is gratitude. As we said, Nabi Musa alayhi salam, his fasting on this day was to show gratitude to Allah Azza wa Jal. Nuh alayhi salam did it to show gratitude to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah, he mentions in the commentary of this hadith that the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they would encourage their children to observe the fast on this day. A mother that was wishing to wean her child doesn't introduce this child straight away to 100% solid diet overnight. She understands what this child, she understands the child's digestive system, that it's not going to cope with a drastic change, and therefore making a small gradual adjustment to the diet, to the sort of the diet, is what's needed. So in a similar way, Imam al-Nawawi rahmatullah says that when a child becomes mature, i.e. reaches the age of puberty, fasting of the month of Ramadan becomes obligatory, and then for him to perform the salah, fast during the month, etc. Therefore, Imam al-Nawawi, he says that to introduce ibadah to a child slowly is better and more beneficial than trying to do it overnight and like a drastic change. And so therefore we have, that's an important lesson for us to take away. Another lesson that's here is the opposition of the Jews. Why? Because it's similar to what's happening, and as a reflection to sort of Ahlul Bayt here, that the Shias, they have hijacked in some way the context of Ahlul Bayt, and obviously we'll talk about it in a bit more detail. But what happens is that when you talk about Ahlul Bayt, it's straight away seen as the Shia. This is an act of what Shias do. This is their day. And in fact, we are more worthy of it. We're more closely linked to this than anybody else. And so therefore, it's important to oppose the Jews, because of what Rasulullah said. And the best way to do it is to fast on the 2 days. Just sort of briefly on some of the actions that we should be doing on the 9th, 10th, 9, 10, or 10, 11, whichever 2 days. So the fasting, which is the most important to do, but it's also important to spend. It's encouraged in Sha'b al-Iman. There's a hadith that من وسع على عياله يوم عاشوراء وسع الله عليه في سائر سنته. That whoever expands his expenditure, whoever expands his wealth on his family on the day of Ashura, Allah Ta'ala will inflate his sustenance for the rest of that year, inshallah. So this comes from a hadith, and we're at a time now. So just to give you an example, summer holidays coming up. So we'll answer the question, inshallah, in terms of what so it is for 9, so Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 9, 10, and 11. But just on coming back to this, the hadith is that the great muhaddith and faqih Sufyan ibn Uyayna, he said that I have been doing this for 50 or 60 years, where he spends on his family on the day of Ashura. So for us, summer holidays are coming up, and we're going to spend on our children anyway. We want to take them to holidays, we're going to take them out, because you think 6 weeks, what am I going to do? Think of it this way: make the intention on Ashura and put your money aside. Whatever you're going to do, assign it on that day. Because you know what, subhanAllah, you'll be acting upon that hadith as well. Another action to do, and it's so important, we should be doing it throughout our lives anyway, but emphasized upon in the hadith as well, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says that in the month of Muharram, there is a day which Allah Ta'ala forgave a nation, and that he will forgive others on this day as well. And this was the day of Ashura. And again, do tawbah on this day. I know it's a midweek, I know it's a working week, I know the children at work, at school, but what's harming us that we perhaps pray Salatul Maghrib and go to sleep. We pray Salatul Maghrib, go to sleep, wake up a bit later and pray Salatul Isha, pray your witr salah, and then pray Salatul Tahajjud. Everyone's asleep, and you're doing tawbah, you're crying to Allah. And this is something that we've seen right the way through the history of all the akabirs that have done this, subhanAllah. So just going to move on to the next slide. Just to talk about the day of Ashura in itself, just to summarize, that the 10th of Muharram, no doubt, is a significant day. It is known as the day of Ashura. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he made hijrah to Medina Munawwara, he found out, again, like we said, the Jews that were fasting on Ashura. But Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one of the things that we summarize here is that he says we have a greater right. When Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this hadith is in Bukhari, he says that we have a greater right, a haqq, to this, and we are nearer to Musa alayhi salam. You will see, no doubt, and especially with what's happening right now in the Middle East, that the eyes will be all on what the Jews do, and they will no doubt be observing this day. So is it not more important for us as a nation, as a ummah, that we are all fasting on this day? Of course, those who can, because subhanAllah, we're all out and we want to raise the emphasis about this. But just to kind of put this into perspective, that this day is really important for us, and that we are more closer to Musa alayhi salam than them. What's the reward of sort of fasting on the day of Ashura. Abu Qatada radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he mentions that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says that I have a strong hope that Allah will forgive the previous year's sins for fasting on the day of Ashura. And here, the sins that are referred here are sort of the minor sins. The Tawbah is required, as we said, for the major sins. But with regards to fasting of the Ashura, as I said, you could do 9, 10, or 10 of 10, 11 of Muharram. However, it is disliked to just fast on just the one day, on the 10th of Muharram alone, because Rasulullah SAW, again, fasting on the day of Ashura is equivalent, and as it carries the reward of fasting for a year. We said again just about spending on your family. I want to talk about some of the traditions, the baseless traditions. How do you explain again? Okay, I think so the point I was trying to make is that it's mentioned in the hadith to spend on your family. Whatever you're going to do, the easiest way I was saying was that you've got summer holidays coming up. So you've got 6 weeks holidays right now. So in the 6 weeks holidays, you're going to take your children out to the park, you're going to buy them ice cream, you take them to the theme park, you go on holiday. Whatever it is you're going to already do anyway, why not allocate that fund? Why not make the intention on the day of Ashura? Because what you're going to be doing is you're acting upon that hadith. So I just want to talk about some of the braceless traditions, just to kind of put things into perspective. Some of these are baseless, and there's nothing found in the seerah or in the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that this day is which Adam alayhi salam was created. It's also said, this is again a baseless tradition, that this is the day when Ibrahim alayhi salam was born. It's also said that this is the day when Allah Azza wa Jalla accepted the repentance of Adam alayhi salam. It's also said, and some people believe this, that this is the day when Qiyamah will take place. Now, subhanAllah, no one knows. This is Alimul Ghaib, no one knows that. But again, some people believe that, and there are books in regards to this. It's also a baseless tradition that whoever takes a bath on the day of Ashura will never get ill. And for many of us, we might think, I'll take a bath. We take a bath every day. And these are baseless traditions. This is something that was mentioned, and this is in the Asian subcontinent. It's actually quite common. And it's a believed tradition, but again, we say it's a baseless one, that whoever puts surma, surma we put on the eyes, whoever puts surma on the day of Ashura will never suffer from an eye disease in that year. It's also a baseless tradition that wearing black clothes and avoiding other colors, you can wear black, there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't, some people, the reason why they say it could be that you're associating with the Shias, but actually there's nothing wrong with that. I do want to bring about some of the incorrect practices as well, and some of the beliefs, because one is a tradition that everyone kind of follows, but one is an actual belief which forms part of an aqidah. So some people take it that it's a sunnah. Some people take it that as a sunnah to prepare a particular meal on this day of Ashura. And this practice too, again, has no basis in the authentic Islamic books. But I do want to draw a point here, that when we say there's some people believe that this is a belief, that some people believe there's a meal, those who fast on the day of Ashura, naturally you will be making a meal for iftar. It doesn't reference to that, and unless you have a belief of that in that particular one meal. But iftar is the breaking of your fast, so it doesn't reference to that. Some of the people, they attribute the sanctity of Ashura to the shahada of Hussein radiallahu anhu during his battle with the Syrian army. And no doubt the martyrdom of Hussein radiallahu anhu is indeed a tragic incident in our history. Yet the sanctity of Ashura can never ever be ascribed to this event or any other event. Simple reason for that, the sanctity of Ashura was established during the days of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that it went back way before that. And so therefore, to kind of have this belief that the Ashura has come for, or Ashura is observed for the death of these, or the death of Hussein, or the birth of Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu, it has no merit in this. Some people also mourn on this day, and they will hold various ceremonies in honor of Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu's martyrdom. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, remember this point, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had forbidden us from holding these mourning ceremonies on the death of any person. So let alone the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but the people of Jahiliyyah, the people of ignorance, they used to mourn over their deceased through loud lamentations, by tearing their clothes apart, by beating their cheeks, and by beating their chests. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he prohibited the Muslims from doing all of this, and he directed them to observe patience by saying, "Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un." And we find many ahadith that contain this subject matter, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, he is not from our group who slaps his cheeks, who tears his clothes, and who cries in a manner of the people of Jahiliyyah. And this hadith is in Bukhari. Just want to kind of a point on this, that many a times we live in a society that sadly, sometimes we see these acts and we think that it's okay. You have a friend, you have someone in a family, they've lost a loved one, and you see them do these acts of beating the cheeks and the chest. What you've got to be conscious of is, just because somebody's doing it doesn't mean that it's okay. These are acts of jahiliyyah as prescribed by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, khair, I'm going to. So yes, we'll talk about the Sunni view. Sorry. Just lastly on the Sunni view, just generally speaking, the day of Ashura is, as I said, largely associated with the incident of Karbala and the shahada of the grandson of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Sayyidina Hussein radiallahu anhu. And no doubt it's a tragic incident, but the Sunni view is that Ashura did not acquire its significance because of this death, and it was due to the greatness of this day that we've seen and we've talked about from Musa alayhi salam and Nuh alayhi salam and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam talk about it. But Hazrat Maulana Yunus rahimahullah, he mentioned that beating the chest, injuring oneself, stabbing oneself, and mourning in an extreme manner is not part of Islam. And the reason why I say this explicitly is because we live in a town, in an area where there are people who do this, and you will see this. And he has explicitly said this is not, he's not saying they're not Muslims, he's saying this is not part of Islam. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he gave his uncle, Sayyidina Hamza radiallahu anhu, the title of Sayyid al-Shuhada. But there was no such extremism in the way he mourned for him. And there's so many other members from the Ahlul Bayt that were martyred. But there was never, ever such fanatical, senseless and baseless mourning. And sort of just on that note, we see year in, year out, it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to elevate the pious souls and to grant them the higher stages of Jannah. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. So just want to, okay, let's move on to the next slide. Just conscious there's some questions and stuff coming in at the moment. So I think best if I answer them, if we've got time at the end, because I don't want to get disrupted. So if I don't, apologies if anyone does feel like I'm not coming back to you or you've put comments in. But Jazakallah khair, do keep it engaged, inshallah. Now I'm going to look at the sort of the build up to Karbala. What is the need to, because someone could say now, for example, we know about Karbala and it's established and it's there. So why do we need to look at it from a different perspective? And there is a need to review it whilst discussing this event of Karbala in a manner that today it's just general knowledge amongst the masses. Now, if you scratch the surfaces slightly, you'll find that it will raise more questions than the answers. And you'll have no choice. You can't ignore these questions that come up. And especially in the versions of Karbala, which is the common practice, which is the common known. A lot of our Sunni brothers and sisters don't know our versions. In fact, I was never open to a lot of this until we go and we study and then we find out. So growing up and our children growing up, it's important to kind of put that into perspective in light of the Quran and the Sunnah and sort of the principles that are laid out for the acceptance of these historical narrations. So what sort of comes about, and this is sort of just looking at the crux of it, what comes about these, because we're saying the more you scratch, because no doubt at the end of today's webinar, you're going to be left with a lot more questions. And it's about understanding that those questions do have answers. But unfortunately, we haven't got the time unless we set other seminars. You can focus an entire webinar on just answering those questions that come up, that raise. But on this first one, we say, right, so these are some just examples of what comes about. It's generally understood, right, that Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he went to Iraq to fight against the evil forces of Yazid in Iraq, so Yazid ibn Muawiyah. What has unfortunately not been considered in this is that the time of his going to Iraq, the governor of Iraq at that time was a Sahabi, Nu'man ibn Bashir. He was a Sahabi at the time. And the entire army, because don't forget, this was the Khilafah we're talking about, and the armies were under his command. So what evil could they possibly have been committing? That's a question that comes up. Another thing is that we look at in the reasons that why Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he gave to the Sahaba of Hijaz. Now, whilst explaining the need for him to proceed to Iraq, he did not once even make mention of Yazid. And we hear about all of these allegations of alcohol, fornication, committing openly, doing fisk, etc. Al-iyadhu billah. All of this stuff, he doesn't mention any of this. All that he mentioned was that the masses of Iraq they had not pledged allegiance to the new Khalif, which was Yazid. And inshallah, we'll talk a bit more in detail of the kind of build-up. This is just to give you a few ideas of what's going to come and how we can look for the answers. So if Yazid was an open sinner in the court of the Khilafah, in the court of the Khalif, because these are the allegations that come up about him. At the time, there were many, many senior members of the Sahaba and the Tabi'un in Sham, in Damascus. They didn't rise against him. And it is ludicrous to think that the Sahaba would not speak when they see something wrong, or even the Tabi'un. Even after the event of Karbala, Nu'man ibn Bashir, who was a high-ranking Sahabi, he remained on the side of Yazid as a chief minister. So could it be possible that the Khalif, he openly commits all of these atrocities and a Sahabi just sits quietly on the side? The other Sahabi, Abdullah ibn Ja'far, who was the nephew of Ali radiallahu anhu, was also amongst the elite of Yazid's cabinet. He never said anything about it, despite all of these views and opinions that come out. So these people remain. Another point to kind of remember is that had Yazid been committing open evil after becoming the Khalif, would it have ever seemed possible that Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Umar, who pledged allegiance to him, whereas in the lifetime of Muawiyah, they refused to do so? It would mean that when Yazid was going, they abstained from pledging allegiance, but on his turning evil, they accepted him open arms. So these are the way that it's portrayed. Now, no doubt, Yazid ibn Muawiyah does have some blame in this, and inshallah we'll cover that a bit later on. So just to kind of, as I said, give you an idea of these are some of the issues and some of the kind of points that come about. Just to give you some comparisons, because everyone will have questions about this. Everyone has questions, and this is about previous incidents. If you go back in history, that Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha, the version of Karbala that we're going to try and portray and we're going to try and bring up is a different version. It's another side to it. Aisha radiallahu anha, if you think about it, she was deceived by the hypocrites, and that's the point I'm going to bring here, is that there's Yazid ibn Muawiyah on one side, Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu on another side. They fought together in many battles. They stood side by side. They didn't have an issue with each other. However, there was someone in between, and these were the hypocrites. And this is the fact that the Shias don't seem to want to accept. It's a blame. And for us, as Sunni, as Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we take the middle route. We neither go onto neither of the extremes. But just to give the example, that just as Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha was deceived by the hypocrites when she set up for Basra, in order to ensure that the killers of Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anha brought a trial, these hypocrites launched the first attack in order to ignite the war between the parties of Hazrat Ali and Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha in the Battle of Jamal, when both parties seemed to be on the verge of reaching a truce. So just as they were about to make a truce, these hypocrites came and they caused that fight. And this is the same thing that happened in Karbala. Just a point here, that this, up until this point, the biggest blow, the most deaths that occurred to the Muslims were between the Battle of Siffin and the Battle of Jamal. And I'll explain towards the end, inshallah, just about what Battle of Jamal was. But it's a point to know that in no other battle did Muslims lose more lives than what they had lost in the Battle of Jamal and Battle of Siffin. You know, Battle Uhud, Badr, all of these, the assassins, the Persians, that all of these battles, not that in comparison, what the Muslims had lost, the lives that were lost at Jamal and Siffin, that's the most in comparison to the other ones. A point here from to understand our version, that Hazrat Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu was deceived by the Iraqi hypocrites into proceeding towards Iraq, believing in the countless letters that had reached him with false promises from the masses of Iraq that they had not pledged allegiance to Yazid and were waiting for Hazrat Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu come to accept the allegiance. And again, we see that from, like I said, we haven't got the full time, enough time to go through the full breakdown of the detail. But this is when the Iraqis, the Kufa, the Ahlul Kufa, what happened was, Ahlul Kufa, they wrote letter. So when Muawiyah passed away, just very briefly, because I will talk about it in a second, but the Ahlul Kufa, when Yazid came into power and took the Khilafah, the people of Kufa, they threatened that they basically, they're not going to plead allegiance to him, and they threatened Hussein radiallahu anhu with Islam. Now here's what I mean by threatened. Back in the days, the Khalifa would lead people in Jum'ah, so he would lead Jum'ah. So the people of Kufa, and it's approximately 30 to 40,000 people, they refused that, unless Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu comes, they're not going to pray Jumu'ah. And that is what actually led him to come up. So it's about showing the false promises that they had. They said they didn't plead allegiance. They wanted to pledge allegiance to Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu. On another hand, just to kind of coming up to this, build up to it, is that Yazid was deceived. Because everyone blames, Yazid does have blame, but Yazid ibn Muawiyah was deceived into sending Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. Here's another name to remember, and we'll talk about him in a moment or so. But Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, he was the new governor. First, it was a Sahabi, Nu'man ibn Bashir. And Nu'man ibn Bashir, he was a Sahabi obviously he knew that the Hussein radiallahu anhu was the grandson of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but he was quite soft. And so Yazid, who was the Khalifa, was deceived into sending Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad to Iraq to replace Nu'man ibn Bashir, because they thought he wasn't tough enough. He had a weak attitude and he was not strong enough to rebel this possible rebellion. So the other person to kind of remember in this, is sort of just to build up of this, is a person by the name of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. Umar ibn Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. So Umar ibn Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, the son of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, who also was sent out to prevent Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu from entering into Iraq. So he was the man that was responsible to place Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu under arrest. Now I want to look at sort of what the needs were. What was the political need at the time? So if the Khilafah is already established, you've already got a system, why was it needed? Why did Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu want to take the Khilafah? So just to give you a brief background, Hassan radiallahu ta'ala anhu and Muawiyah had clashed before. 6 months, Hassan radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he gives off the Khilafah and he says, you know what, you take it. Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, Sahabi, passes away. He gives his Khilafah to his son, Yazid ibn Muawiyah, who's a tabi'i, okay? And when he takes the Khilafah, there were many Sahaba, senior Sahaba, who weren't happy with that. And these were the likes of Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Zubayr, Abdul Rahman ibn Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhum, they weren't happy with the appointment of Yazid being the successor. So at the time when there was someone who could have been a bit, who would be able to keep the ummah united, naturally we think, okay, the Prophet ﷺ, his grandson, there's a direct link. He seems more suitable. But the Khalifa at the time was Muawiyah. He gave it to his son. So the need at the time was to keep the ummah together, keep the dignity of the Arabs intact. And as far as the political field was concerned, somebody that wouldn't fail in the deception of others and other nations, because don't forget, Islam was growing at the time. So they needed a strong Khalifa that would be able to keep the Muslim army and that would obey them wholeheartedly. So in such a situation, to sort of appoint someone based on merely on piety or knowledge, it wouldn't fulfill the need at the time. And this gave rise to two conflicting viewpoints. Sayyidina Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he preferred the former viewpoint, which was, and Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu, along with the other Sahaba, they were of the second opinion. The first opinion, which was Sayyidina Muawiyah, he did not commit any injustice or sort of oppression or dhulm on his opposed view, but he didn't try to suppress them as well. He didn't try to imprison them, nor kill them, nor punish them in any way. Even the Shia historians, they heavily opposed Sayyidina Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, because when he mentioned that Muawiyah, he performed Hajj in the year of 49 after Hijri, 49th Hijri, he treated the people with love and kindness, and he didn't force anyone to pledge allegiance to Yazid. So there's two viewpoints here. The first one of that is that this is the Khalifa, and you have to pledge allegiance. Otherwise, it's prison. It's to the worst. It's death. Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu and Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhum were initially, they were opposed to the view of Muawiyah, but they later on conformed to it, except for three people. And these are the names we're going to try and remember. That Abdullah ibn Zubayr, he didn't agree, so he was on the opposition. Abdurrahman ibn Abu Bakr and Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhum, they were on the opposition. However, Abdullah ibn Abbas and Abdullah ibn Umar, these are big Sahabis, they were with Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So they agreed to the Khilafah of Muawiyah radiallahu anhu and sort of his appointment of the Khilafah going to his son. So the need at the time was they needed someone strong. Coming back to the point, sorry. The need at the time was they needed somebody strong that will be able to expand. At the time they were in Iraq, in Kufa, and the Sahaba majority were in Mecca and Medina, and so it was expanding out, going towards the west or sort of east. Because at the time they were fighting in Iraq, in Turkey as well. So they were going into that direction. So they needed somebody strong that will be able to maintain that entire area. So I'm going to try and move on a bit more in sort of what happens after the death of Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala anhu and sort of the invitation that came from the people of Kufa. So after the demise of Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, the people of Kufa, as I said, they started to write letters inviting him to become their leader. This was Hussein radiallahu anhu. I mentioned earlier on, for example, they threatened to stop, they wouldn't pray Jumu'ah, but they would send letters to him through messengers, and to a point, Hussein radiallahu anhu had two big bags full of letters. Now, when we talk about big bags and sacks, it's when a camel stands up, it has two sacks on the sides, not a sort of average black bin bags. No, these were big sacks. So just to give the context, that this is how many letters that he had received inviting him to become the sort of governor, or to become the Amir and the Khalifa. But in Makkah al-Mukarramah, Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu was discussing the issue of going to Iraq with his companions and his sort of associates. A point that comes here was, when the invitation from Iraq initially came, Sayyidina Hussein radiallahu anhu, don't forget, the senior Sahaba at the time were in Mecca and Medina at the time. And so he consulted them and they advised him not to go to Iraq. So this was Abdullah ibn Umar and it was Abdullah ibn Abbas. They said to him not to go. Why is that important to understand? Because this is also another Shi'i view that he was led to his butcher. And how did they become aware of it? Just to give you maybe over the next, I'll give 5 minutes just to kind of summarize what actually happened. Muslim ibn Aqil. Muslim ibn Aqil was the cousin of Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Those who don't know Muslim ibn Aqil, he was the first cousin of Hussein radiallahu anhu. So Ali radiallahu anhu's older brother, Aqil. And Aqil's son was Muslim. So Muslim ibn Aqil ibn Abi Talib, so the grandson of Abu Talib. Muslim ibn Aqil was the right-hand man of Hussein radiallahu anhu. He was his first cousin, but he was one of the closest people to him. And so when these letters started to come and these invitations started to come, before he decided to make way to Iraq, because it was overwhelming, near enough 40,000 people are saying that we want to pledge allegiance to you, and we want you to become our Khalifa, and that we don't pledge our allegiance to Yazid. So it was then Muslim ibn Aqil was sent. Muslim ibn Aqil, when he arrived, he went with, as you might want to call, a scouting team, so small scouts team with 3-4 people. He went into Kufa, and I'm not going to give you the full details of this, and I have to really cut it short because we're going to talk about it a bit later on. But when he went, Muslim ibn Aqil, he saw with his own eyes the overwhelming support of all of these people. And so he sent a messenger back to Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu in Medina, advising him that it is true, these letters are genuine, and there is a genuine support for you to arrive and to come to Kufa in Iraq. And it's almost, as somebody would say in modern terminology, as an uprising, a rebellion. So when he received that information and it's confirmed and it's corroborated, it was at that stage, that's when the Sahaba were saying, the senior Sahaba were telling him not to go, but he went with the advice because it was verified and it was corroborated and it was seen that it was safe for him to go and there was a need for him to go. But at this juncture, there could be a question, as I said, that many people would think that why did he go against them? And in our Sunni view, also another person that opposed him was Muhammad ibn Hanafiya. Now we know, and subhanAllah, I'll be one to say, even when I studied about it, I was amazed by this. Many of us think that Sayyidina Fatima radiallahu anha, Ali radiallahu anhu, they had 2 sons, Hassan and Hussein, and that's all that's spoken about really. But after the death of Fatima radiallahu anha, Ali radiallahu anhu, he married another woman called Hanafiya. And so therefore, Hassan radiallahu anhu and Hussein radiallahu anhu, they had other siblings from another mother. And one of them was Muhammad ibn Hanafiya, who was a stepbrother to Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And so his own stepbrother, because don't forget, Hassan radiallahu anhu had already passed. So Sayyidina Hussein radiallahu anhu, his own brother also tried to dissuade him from going to Kufa. And he explained to them the nature of Iraq, that why would Sayyidina Hussein radiallahu anhu, why would he not heed their advice? And this is something that, the question that comes up. Now, the answer from a Sunni perspective is that we have to keep this in mind, that just like these Sahaba radiallahu anhum were mujtahids. Mujtahids are those who have the qualifications of applying their mind and reaching a conclusions in theology. And so based on that ijtihad, the reasoning is correct. Hussein radiallahu anhu, he was a mujtahid, and he regarded his ijtihad as correct. Ijtihad meaning the reasoning of Sharia. Because don't forget, the Khilafah is an Islamic ruling. It's a proper method that's come. I mean, it just stopped just over 100 years ago. So it's always been there, and it's something that's mentioned every single week in Jumu'ah. So to oppose it, it really takes something. So a lot of people question that, and the answer to that is that he was a mujtahid, and therefore his ijtihad, his reasoning was accepted. He felt that the Khalifa, at the time, he felt the Khalifa wasn't strong enough. It's not that he was opposing that, he was saying Yazid isn't good enough, but that actually to keep the Muslim Ummah united, there's almost a 40,000 people there's an uprising there. So certainly he would have wanted to have that dialogue with Yazid to ensure that actually if you can't take it, then the Khilafah should be passed away. But this is just speculation at this time. But again, just to clarify that misconception, that it wasn't that he was led into a trap. There was a trap, but not the way that it's portrayed to us. Our Sunni view is that we were aware, we do know. His own brother even told him not to go. But he didn't go, Hussein radiallahu anhu, he didn't go knowingly to be butchered. So I hope that sort of just makes it clear, inshallah. There's a lot of information. So we'll go to the next slide, inshallah. There's a lot of information overload here, so I think I'm going to take a quick little break, not for me, but just for everyone. Just give 5 minutes. We'll catch up on some of the notes, inshallah, and then we'll come back. And this is again, we want to talk about some of the what I call a myth buster. So it's 55. Inshallah, we'll come back at 8 o'clock, inshallah, just to give 5 minutes for us to observe what's been said, inshallah. Is that okay, Brother Abdul Hay?
Yes, that's fine, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. So on that point, inshallah, alhamdulillah, very, very beneficial and a lot of information that Shaykh has, passed with us, mashallah. Just want to make a quick announcement of a few things. Some of you may be aware the mental health programs that we are offering. Alhamdulillah, we had one last month, and inshallah, we're going to have it for the next 3 months as well. Do look out for that, inshallah. The post is not out yet, the registration link. Inshallah will be out next week, so just be sure to follow us on our social media, on Facebook, Instagram, or even on our website. You can subscribe, and inshallah you should receive emails. And another thing as well, alhamdulillah, what we're doing today, this is also in partnership with Global Relief Trust, GRT, which is our official charity partner. Alhamdulillah, we do a lot of projects across the world. Many of you will be aware because you get updates from myself on the WhatsApp groups for those of you who are on there. So alhamdulillah, we have a physical team in Gaza, for example, as well. Since the conflict or the massacre began, alhamdulillah, our team has been there distributing aid. Our brother Yusuf is a frontline paramedic as well, and he's been literally saving lives. So first and foremost, may dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants them afiyah and liberation. And with that as well, let's take an opportunity to, inshallah, donate towards the cause. We have various other projects as well across the world, in Yemen, Syria, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Rohingya, and a few other countries. So I humbly request everyone to donate generously any amount. We are in the blessed days of Muharram, so I encourage everyone to take part in that, inshallah. And we have something else coming up as well. Inshallah, the more information of that will be posted on our social media, where you'll have an opportunity to win a free trip to Masjid al-Aqsa. Alhamdulillah, for the last couple of years, we've had winners and they've traveled to Masjid al-Aqsa by entering the competition. Now, the competition is pretty straightforward. Hopefully, the admin will have the link and may forward that onto you. If not, I'll post it in a while. So the idea is for people to participate and fundraise as much as they can until the end of the year. So until the end of December 2024. So we've got 5-6 months remaining. And inshallah, in the new year, someone will be announced. We're going to make it fair. Any random person will be selected to win a free trip, all expenses paid, to Masjid al-Aqsa. This is just a way of us encouraging one another to fundraise and do what we can to help our brothers and sisters around the world. We'll provide you with full support in terms of how to fundraise and support you the best as we can. So do look out for that as well, alhamdulillah. As I mentioned, we've had 2 previous winners who have traveled to Masjid al-Aqsa with our partners. So just on that note, inshallah, please do subscribe if you haven't to our website. Follow on Quranic Insights, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, inshallah, and keep up to date with our programs. Just a point on that mental health program that I've mentioned. Some of you may have attended that last month. In November, we will be having an in-person conference in Birmingham. And inshallah, you guys are welcome to participate in that and join the program. So it's going to be in person. We're expecting about 200, 250 people. It's going to be for sisters only, but do look out for that as well. Inshallah, alhamdulillah, it's a very exciting project and a very much needed one as well. With people who are suffering with depression, anxiety, any kind of different types of mental health, we'll be covering that, inshallah. So hope that's for now, inshallah. Do look out for the links. Inshallah, I'll be posting it. The admin will also post a few links that may interest you, inshallah. With that said, let the Shaykh continue whenever he's ready.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. So, just thought, break away from it a little bit, come back to, before we go into sort of the Karbala and talk about all of this, it's quite gruesome, and I don't want to really talk, just go straight into it, but also about Ashura as well. So, as I said, Mythbusters, because it's about sometimes putting things into context so that people can see how you can relate things. You have a conversation, subhanAllah, nowadays people are debating at work, and sometimes it's just the most common question you put through to them, and it can get someone to start thinking. Now, martyrdom, shahada, it's not strange. It's nothing strange, or it's not uncommon in the Muslims. And the flourishing garden of Islam has been watered by the blood of many shuhada from the very, very early days of Islam. And among those great sons of Islam who sort of crowned their lifelong efforts for the sake of deen by finally laying down their lives was Sayyidina Hussein radiallahu anhu, the great noble grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And again, his martyrdom was indeed heart-wrenching. But on the day of Muharram, in the 61st, 61 AH after Hijri, Hussein radiallahu anhu, as we know, was mercilessly martyred. Before his very own eyes, scores of his immediate family also tasted shahada. They were also martyred. And just to kind of give a point here, and we'll talk about this a bit later on, but sadly, his noble head was severed from his body, he is decapitated. And there are many various tragic details of this incident. Some are too gruesome to even comprehend for us. And you know what, subhanAllah, if you were to study it, the way I'd explain it is you'd have tears of blood because of how gruesome that incident is. But similarly, the pages of our history are filled with the blood of other shuhada as well. So a question that some of us need to ask ourselves is that how is it that we've remembered the 10th of Muharram, but we're totally, totally unaware of heart-rending martyrdom of many other great personalities of Islam? Of them, we've got to remember Amir al-Mu'mineen, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, about whom Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he says that لو كان بعد نبيا لكان عمر, that if there were to be a Nabi after me, if there were to be a Nabi after me, it would have been Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, and this is in the Sunan of Tirmidhi. And we know that whilst leading Salat al-Fajr, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu was stabbed 6 times by the fire worshippers, Abu Lu'lu', and he radiallahu anhu fell to the ground, unable to continue the salah. And then Sayyidina Abdul Rahman ibn Auf then completed the salah, and then Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu was then carried to his house. And the wounds that proved fatal to him, those stabs that were fatal, that he passed away on the 1st of Muharram in 24 AH, and he left this temporary world. And you know what? The Muslim world was shattered upon the Shahada of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. So for us as Sunnis, as Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we don't only just grieve for one particular Sahabi, we grieve for them all. And that's important for us to remember as well. Have you a question for us? Have we ever heard of anybody observing the day of Shahadat Umar? Because that's an answer that opposes that people who think that Muharram is for it's become blessed because of this day. There's nothing that's mentioned about Shahadat Umar. Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu, Nafi' rahimahullah, he says that Uthman radiallahu anhu, he saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his dream the night before he was killed. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that, "Oh Uthman, break your fast with us tonight." And then he was killed the next day whilst he was fasting. The third Khalifa of Islam, the son-in-law of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, again, he was brutally murdered. And when the enemy besieged his house, for days he was unable to get away. He wasn't able to even get water from the well, which he had purchased and he had gifted to everybody. That's the same well. And then again on Friday, 18th of Dhul Hijjah, the enemy finally broke into his house. Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu was reciting Quran, and no mercy was shown to him. His blood was spilled over the pages of the Quran. And this very Quran, if you go to Uzbekistan, if you go, subhanAllah, that very Quran is there. But the question is, no one has ever observed the day of Shahadat Uthman. So Shahadat Hussein, again, Sayyidina Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu, again, the beloved uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself. So someone can think that Rasulullah ﷺ wasn't alive when all of these incidents took place. But let's look at what Prophet ﷺ himself did. He witnessed the heart-rendering martyrdom of his own uncle, his beloved uncle, Sayyidina Hamza, in the Battle of Uhud. And after he was murdered, martyred, brutally killed, massacred, his body was defiled and severely mutilated. His ears, his nose were cut off. The body of the Prophet, the beloved uncle of the Prophet ﷺ, was ripped open and his liver was removed. This was taken away and chewed. We would talk, this is so gruesome. But Rasulullah ﷺ was in so much grief and in so much pain that when the killer of Sayyidina Hamza accepted Islam, Rasulullah ﷺ, he requested him not to come in front of him because it would remind him of his uncle and the grief would come back. However, Rasulullah ﷺ, he did not observe any day as Shahadat Hamza. We also know about the Bi'r Maw'una, the Battle of Bi'r Maw'una that took place on the 4th year after Hijri. That's another incident where great Sahaba laying down their lives for the cause of Deen. Rasulullah, he requested to send some of his companions to teach the people of Najd. And on the request of Rasulullah, he sent 70 Sahaba who were all Huffaz and Qurra. Not one, Huffaz and Qurra. And on the way, they were attacked and almost all of them were martyred. Rasulullah, again, he was in great grief. And for 1 month in Salatul Fajr, he cursed these people who had deceived and martyred his beloved companions so mercilessly. Again, no day was set aside where they were observed the day of the Shuhada, the day their martyrdom. No day was put aside. So this 10th of Muharram, no doubt, it bleeds the hearts of us, of believers, as we recount the incidents of Shuhada, of the martyrdom of Sayyidina Hussein radiallahu anhu. We also experience the grief when we recount the martyrdom of Sayyidina Umar, Sayyidina Uthman, and Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhum. We are greatly, pained when we hear these stories of Bi'r Ma'una, all of the Hufaz. We're sad by Uhud, by Badr, and all of these battles. But nevertheless, despite our sort of grief, we will refrain all things that alienate us from Sharia. And if we observe the day of martyrdom of Sayyidina Hussein radiallahu anhu, then what about the others? And in that case, almost every single day of the year would be spent in mourning. So from this, we understand that the 10th of Muharram is not a day to observe as the martyrdom of Sayyidina Hussein radiallahu anhu. Rather, it is a significant day that Allah Azza wa Jalla saved Musa alayhi salam and Banu Israel from Fir'aun. And it is also on that day that Nuh alayhi salam's ark docked on Mount Judi. This is again from Musnad Ahmad. The point here is that it's clear that the day of Ashura is not a day of mourning. The reason why I keep coming back to it, and I don't want to mention any areas, but very close to us, there are youngsters these are some of my students, around 17, 18. They were discussing how they want to go to some of these incidents, and these are Muslims, Sunni Muslims who come from well respected families, but they've been exposed to this and they don't understand. And that's why I keep emphasizing this point, that they want to go, that and this day of Ashura is not for mourning the tragic incidents of Karbala, because this, as it's transpired many many years ago, and it just happened to be on the day of Ashura. We have to explain to our children, our families, and also to ourselves, to understand that our hearts bleed as we recall the incidents of the martyrdom of Hussein radiallahu anhu. But we have to also remember that our heart also bleeds when we hear the martyrdom of other great personalities of Islam. And so we ask Allah Azza wa Jalla that He grant us the true understandings of deen, of the perfect teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that we abstain from practices which go against and that dictates against Sharia, inshallah. So I hope that's been understood. Again, I just wanted to emphasize this point, as we say, before we go back on track with the aspects of Karbala, inshallah. So, yes, next slide, please. So, the different aspects of Karbala we're going to talk about. So, we're going to talk about the journey, the arriving at Karbala. There was a speech, some aspects, some points from what Hazrat Hussein radiallahu anhu, he said, the battle and sort of the aftermath of Karbala. And this just in the battle in itself, we're going to break it apart. And then this next slide, very briefly, we're going to touch upon some of the points. But before I go into it, I've got about roughly 20 minutes to half an hour. I'm trying and zoom through it as quick as I can. But I'm coming back to Muslim ibn Aqil. So now, Muslim ibn Aqil, what happened was, just a point here, that Yazid ibn Muawiyah, all he wanted to do at this stage was to ensure. So these people of Kufa, right? So he's the Khalifa in Sham, in Damascus. The people of Kufa in Iraq, they were saying that they did not pledge allegiance to Yazid, and that they only will pledge allegiance to Hussein radiallahu anhu. Muslim ibn Aqil, he comes, he verifies it. At this stage, the word gets to Yazid ibn Muawiyah, the Khalifa. And so he just wants to ensure that there's no rebellion, that there's no uprising. And that at the time, the Sahabi Nu'man ibn Bashir was taking it very lightheartedly. So he sent, in place of Nu'man ibn Bashir, he sent Ibn Ziyad. He sent Ibn Ziyad there to replace the governor. And this young governor is about 28 years old, very ambitious, is impetuous, and the point here, and I'm going to just say it because I may not be able to bring all of it back together, but he is one of the crooks. He is one of the people that caused all of this. So as you might say, he is the munafiq, or he's the hypocrite, because everything, he had the brains behind it. He was ambitious to kind of go forward. So Yazid was in Sham and he was in Kufa. So remember this, that Yazid, all he wanted to do was ensure that there was no rebellion here. So Ibn Zayd, so Yazid sent him, and with him, Yazid, he sent a sort of, not an army, but say about 17 to 20 people went with the new governor now. So as he comes into Iraq, he starts asking around. Now, when he arrives, people of Kufa at this stage are expecting Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu to come, because they know that the message has been sent by Muslim ibn Aqil, so they're waiting for him to come. But at that time, it's the new governor that arrives instead of Hussein radiallahu anhu. So the people of Kufa, they think that this is the new Ibn Ziyad, this is Hussein radiallahu anhu, and as he comes in, his face is covered, Ibn Ziyad, and people are welcoming him, and they're telling him this is the new governor, and they're telling him that they're going to do bay'at. So ultimately, if you think Ibn Ziyad has just walked in to Kufa, and straight away those speculations, those rumors, he verifies them as being true. So he starts, as he's coming, he's gone into action now. The first thing he does is he needs to now get to Muslim ibn Aqil, because realistically Muslim ibn Aqil is the spokesperson for Hussein radiallahu anhu. So he's there going around trying to find him, and so he basically acts as a person that has come from his Ahl is a Shia, but he's come from a Sham, and he's got a lot of this money. And just cutting the story short, he goes to the person that's hosting um, Muslim ibn Aqil. And so when he goes there, he finds out who this person is, and then he calls him. It turns out the person that was hosting Hussein radiallahu anhu was one of the cabinet members, was one of the elite, was one of the closest allies of the Khalifa at the time. And so therefore he calls him to the palace. Again, I'm cutting it quite short, just conscious of time. So he calls him to the palace, and he basically takes him hostage. The host, he takes him hostage. Muslim ibn Aqil gets wind of it, and now Muslim ibn Aqil, with his all of the people that have pledged allegiance to him, he now marches to the palace of Ibn Ziyad, who is the spokesperson, who is the governor of Kufa at the time. And this is really interesting because, again, if you go away and you'd have to do your own research and go back in history, the same thing happens 3 times, exact same thing. Muslim ibn Aqil now comes with 40,000 people. 4,000 people. So from the 40,000 people who had pledged allegiance to him, or well, to Hussein radiallahu anhu, he then says that the host has been taken, hostage, and he asks 4,000 people go with him to now the palace. Now you can imagine, Ibn Ziyad doesn't have an army; he's only come with 17 people. And here, Muslim ibn Aqil comes with 4,000 people, and he's now sieged, is outside the gates of the palace. This is a trick this is how it shows the impetuous Ibn Ziyad, the governor. What he does is, from his own side, from the side of Yazid ibn Muawiyah's side, he finds all of these people who are outside, all of these tribesmen. He finds one person from each tribe, and he finds out from them, what would your tribe like? And he tries to bribe them. And what happens is the Ahlul Kufa, the people of Kufa, each tribe is given wealth and whatever they want. And slowly, everyone is taken away. Everyone goes. So after Salatul Fajr, he had 4,000 people, and they are bribed. Every single tribe, Ibn Ziyad bribes them, and they all leave him slowly. Come afternoon, Asr time, there are approximately from 4,000, he is down to 70 people. And then at Asr time, at Maghrib time, Ibn Ziyad prays Salat al-Maghrib, and he looks back and he's down to 30 people, because everyone's slowly leaving him. And this is Muslim ibn Aqil, who had 4,000 people behind him in the morning. After Salatul Maghrib, as he's walking, as the night falls before Salatul Isha, he's down to 10 people. And then it is said, the same Muslim ibn Aqil, everyone's looking for him, there's a bounty on his head. The same Muslim ibn Aqil who's told Hussein radiallahu anhu to come to Kufa, he is now alone. So he's got 10 people behind him, and he's now going down the streets, in these little streets and alleyways, because he's got nowhere to live, nowhere to go. And as the night falls, and as he's walking down these alleyways, lo and behold, those 10 people, one at a time, they will leave him. And it comes to a point that Muslim ibn Aqil is just left alone. It's just him. And so he knocks on the house of this one elderly woman, and the lady says, "Who are you?" And again, I'm cutting it very short, but he says, "I'm a beggar," and he asks for some help, and the lady keeps him. Then this elderly lady, she Muslim ibn Aqil, he tells her, because she's now thinking, "I've given you food, get going." And so he seeks shelter, and he tells this old lady that, "Look, I'm Muslim ibn Aqil, and I'm looking for shelter, so please look after me." This old lady gives him shelter, but her son comes, and it's said that when her son comes, he's obviously greedy. So the mom tells her son, "Don't go out and tell anybody," but he's greedy, and he goes out, and he goes and informs the general, who is Ibn al-Ash'ath at the time, the commander. He goes and tells him that, Muslim ibn Aqil is in my house, and again, he wants wealth for it. And so the house is surrounded. Cutting the story short, again, Muslim ibn Aqil is taken to the governor, Ibn Ziyad, who takes him on the mountaintop, as you can imagine, like the square, for example, where everyone sees, and he's basically killed. He's thrown off the cliff, and sadly, he's killed then. But before he dies, the commander he says to him, the general, Ibn al-Ash'ath, he tells him, make me one promise. And the promise is that he needs to send a messenger to Hussein radiallahu anhu and to inform him that it is not safe to now come to Kufa anymore. It's not safe for him. Although he goes back on his word, we'll see in the sort of books of history that Ibn Ashad keeps his promise, but he does it at the very last minute. So now we see that Hussein radiallahu anhu, we mentioned that he was told by everybody not to leave, and he's left now and he's on his way. And the messenger, as he's coming towards closer to Kufa, the situation has made a full 360 turn. It's gone the opposite direction now, and actually, the people of Kufa are no longer with him. Those people who said that they would pledge allegiance to him, no longer there anymore. So, subhanallah, I've gone off topic again. So yes, so talking about the journey to Karbala. Sorry, those of you who see my bayans and talks, I have this habit where I get excited and subhanallah, I go off topic and I talk about different things. But just to sort of bring it back into, I find it hard as well to keep on topic. I do have dyslexia, for those of you who are thinking, why does this guy go off topic? But I do have dyslexia, which makes it hard for me to stay with a script. But khair, subhanallah, the journey to Karbala, after receiving this news of the execution of Muslim ibn Aqil and sort of hearing the story of the rebellion, two people were sent. As we said, Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad as the governor, and there was another person called Umar ibn Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. So he was the commander who was told to arrest Hussein radiallahu anhu when he arrives in sort of Kufa. So here, Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he comes towards Kufa. So far, he's not been made aware of anything that's happened in Kufa about Muslim ibn Aqil. He doesn't know anything that's going on. He comes to the gates he arrives at sort of what we now call Karbala. And Yazid had written to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad that he should keep a strict eye on the movements of Hussein radiallahu anhu and to ensure that an uprising does not occur in Iraq. That was the instruction from Yazid to Ibn Ziyad. So as you can imagine, at the borders of sort of Iraq, they were constantly being watched, who's coming, who's going, etc. Now, Yazid had also issued instructions that the caravan of Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu not to be attacked. And as I mentioned in my disclaimer, that there are so many versions. History in itself is it's biased because there's so many opinions. But in one opinion, it is said that Yazid ibn Muawiyah made a clear instruction to Ibn Ziyad, the governor, not to attack Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Strict orders were given that no major decision should be taken except after receiving guidance from the government in Sham, which is obviously Yazid ibn Muawiyah, and we see that instruction wasn't followed. How we know that is that on the 3rd of Muharram is when Hussein radiallahu anhu comes to Karbala, and in a mere 1 day or just over 1 day, we say normally in 1 day, there could have been no way that from Kufa a messenger had gone to Sham, received instructions, had come back. Because what happened is that's when he was placed under arrest. So if you were to scrutinize the pages of history, you'll find that just before the arrival of Muslim ibn Aqil, Yazid was on the verge of having Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad removed from his post as a governor over Basra because of his misdemeanor, misgivings he had about him. So again, the books of history show that even Yazid ibn Muawiyah wasn't too sure about this new governor, because he was, as I said, he was this impetuous young 28-year-old at the time. So when Muslim ibn Aqil when Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he reached this point here, so he was placed under arrest by Umar ibn Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. Now, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu anhu, he had passed away a long time ago. So again, although it's his son, we don't put any blame towards the Sahabi radiallahu anhu. Billah. It's the acts of the son, Umar ibn Sa'ad. And the reason why he's to blame is because he was given instructions to place Hussein radiallahu anhu under arrest. What happens at this juncture is that Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he says, he basically is told, is given the option to pledge allegiance. Ibn Ziyad, not Yazid, not the Khalifa, the governor Ibn Ziyad, he got too ahead of himself. So his conditions was that Hussein radiallahu anhu should kiss the hands of Ibn Ziyad and pledge allegiance to him, meaning he'd pledge allegiance to the Khalifa, obviously as the governor in his place. And you think the history tells us that Hussein radiallahu anhu didn't even pledge allegiance to Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, let alone anybody else who was a Sahabi. Muawiyah radiallahu anhu was a Sahabi, so let alone pledge allegiance to anybody else. So at that time, when he had arrived in sort of in that place, he gave three options. He said, "Okay, I'll talk about two, not the third one." So the two things that were said. The first point was, you pledge allegiance to Ibn Ziyad, or you go away. So this is Hussein radiallahu anhu, or that you go away in what do you call it? When they're taken out, so he exile. So when either he goes into exile, or that he be killed. The third one we don't talk about here because again, the chain isn't very clear. Now Hussein radiallahu anhu, he chooses exile. So he says, let me be. And this is at this stage when Ibn Ziyad, it gets the better of him. And that's when they, for 6 days, because the Shia books will say, the other version will say that he didn't have food to eat, drink for months. And that's not true. Because from the 3rd to the 9th, it's only a matter of 6 days. Although, yes, it's a long time, but it's a period of 6 days in comparison to the other version, which says for months he was not given water, he wasn't given any food, all of this stuff. And so it's quite, there's a massive difference in what's actually being said. And so Hussein radiallahu anhu, at this stage, he basically, I'm going to quickly go through, finish up the actual story, but he doesn't accept any of these points, and he doesn't agree to pledge allegiance to Ibn Ziyad, who then sends this warrior called Shimr, and we'll talk about what happens to all of these people. By the way, brother Abdul Hayy, am I going too fast into the next points, or is it okay?
No, alhamdulillah, I think it's perfectly fine. I'm not sure what happens, but alhamdulillah, it's fine.
Okay, because again, I'm just conscious of time, so I'm trying to go as fast as I can, but I'm not sure if I'm missing points out. But I'll just go on the next point about Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu speak. So from the time Hussein radiallahu anhu found himself, and the reason why I mentioned that there's some 4 points is that there's it has a link to sort of our current days, lessons that we can take away. So from the time when Hussein radiallahu anhu found himself in front of the army, every statement that Hussein radiallahu anhu uttered, there's some indication that we find that we can discuss here, which is that Hussein radiallahu anhu, his coming to Iraq was merely on the basis, this is his point, that him coming to Iraq, because he was led to believe that there were many people in Iraq who at that time had not pledged allegiance to Yazid, and they were rather desirous of pledging allegiance to Hussein radiallahu anhu. So if you can imagine, this is an area, a dead zone as we say, where he believed that these were not people who had pledged allegiance. So he wasn't trying to take away. So there was never a rebellion. And that's one of the points from his speech. So it wasn't that he was doing, because someone will question, and this is about, and actually let me finish the points and then I'll come back and summarize as to how it links to our current day-to-day lives. The second point from his speech is that besides the issue of fighting for the Khilafah, he, radiallahu anhu, had no other issue with Yazid. He never held any misconceptions regarding Yazid's deen, his private life, the management of the government, nothing like that. He never had any issues. The third point is that traitors and evil men in the entire episode were not Yazid and his government. It was not in Sham. Rather, the hypocrites were who forged letters, who invited Hussein radiallahu anhu over and over again, who deceived Muslim ibn Aqil into believing um, that there was a massive following for Hussein radiallahu anhu. Those people were based in Iraq. And then lastly, that if Hussein radiallahu anhu had known from the beginning that the people of Iraq were happy with the Umayyad rule, he radiallahu anhu would never have come over, but he would have rather remained in Hijaz and allowed the Umayyads the right to rule. Now, the reason why I brought this in is it has a reflection in our day-to-day life. Here, when he's coming to Iraq, it was on the grounds that it was a belief that this was a dead zone, this was an area. For us in our sort of day-to-day lives, we have rules over us. So if we're linked to a masjid, there's a masjid committee. If you're linked to a council, there's a council there. There's a government there. As Muslims, it is our belief that we have, and it's a democratic right anyway, because the reason why I'm bringing it back is we've just had the election. And I'm not talking about politics here. I just want to talk about our view, because this is a lesson that we take away. That if there is an area where somebody hasn't taken a role, then as Muslims, it is important for us that we stand up when there is a need for us to, and we stand in places where there is power and there is, when I say power, I mean a seat for decision making. This is the same thing what Hussein radiallahu anhu did. This was a dead area. This was an area that he believed that if he came, he would be in a position of power to influence. He wasn't going in the opposition of the Khilafah. So for us, in masjids, in communities, I won't talk about government, let's just talk masjids in our own communities. In our masjids, in our community centers, we see there's so much work that is required. Just merely the masjid opening and the doors opening for salah is not sufficient. And therefore, if there is a need, if there is a gap there, we are encouraged to stand up and take those positions to ensure that we're creating work and that we're creating activities. Like we see, Brother Abdul has mentioned, obviously, this is for the community. So in a similar way, we are encouraged. Otherwise, what will happen is that as we sit back, when the years become decades and then generations go by, slowly, all of this da'wah work will slowly fade away. That's why it's so important. This is why the reason why I bought it is to, first of all, prove a point, but also that reflect it back into our lives as well. The point in regards to him not having any misconceptions, it's so important for us that as Muslims, and it's sad we have these within our society, as Muslims, we sometimes have misconceptions of the chairman of the mosque or the secretary of the mosque or whatever all these people are. Hussein radiallahu anhu, he never held any misconceptions about Yazid, about his deen, about his private life, nothing. His own interest was just about the ummah. And so therefore, it's so important for us to take a lesson from this, that just from the Karbala incident alone, we need to ensure that when we are dealing with our societies, our communities, even our own sort of wider families, who, many families, the granddad or somebody, the elder in the family has the final call. And we have our differences, but we should never ever question their piety, because that's the one thing that we make a mistake on. And then also to remember the lesson that we take away, third point, that there were always traitors and there were always munafiqs within the circle. And so therefore, when we work, when we make any effort, remember, shaitan will always be there to take us away from our paths. And this is so important, especially in this day and age, when, mashallah, we got a lot of youngsters, subhanallah, who are very, very, enthusiastic about deen and wanting to learn the deen. Sadly, when they show that sort of enthusiasm, it's labeled, sadly. And so therefore, remember that don't let shaitan put those thoughts of hypocrisy within ourselves, of riyah, of kibr, inshallah. So I just wanted to, I know it went off topic, but this was so important given where we are, given the month of Muharram, that we make tawbah and then we make intentions of investing ourselves into our family, because essentially your family is the people who you associate with, it doesn't just mean your line of people, your children, your family can extend to as far as you want it to extend. Subhanallah. So, khair, just that is just one of the 4 points that I wanted to bring about from the speech of Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu. I'm gonna skip because we've talked about the battle in itself and sort of the aftermath about it. Okay, that's the Battle of Jamal and the sort of the martyrs. Okay, just want to check the notes. Okay, now I want to talk about sorry guys, I'm just going to check some notes that I've made here. Okay, let's talk about, because I think somebody also asked as well in regards to the dates of when it actually happened. But just give reference to the Battle of Jamal, because I know it was in the comments as well. Somebody talking about Battle of Jamal. The Battle of Jamal, it took place in the 36 Hijri. Abdullah ibn Zubayr, he relates that his father Zubayr ibn Awam, he called him and said, "Oh son, today those who are killed will either be oppressors or the oppressed." And he had a feeling that he was going to be oppressively killed. And this hadith sort of just talks about that Battle of Jamal, and it was all to do with oppression and dhulm, and about selling off land and paying off debts. And Zubayr radiallahu anhu, he made wasiyah of 1/3 of his wealth to be distributed. That link of Battle of Jamal comes back to Sayyidina Hussein radiallahu anhu at Karbala, because at that juncture in the Battle of Jamal, they needed, it was related to oppressing dhulm, it was related to wealth, it was related to sort of land, and he needed the support because he was oppressed. And at Karbala was the same thing. Hussein radiallahu anhu, he needed all the support that he could get. And the relevance to that is how the Battle of Jamal came about. The Battle of Jamal, the only reason why I reference it is so that you can go away and study about it. But there was the munafiqs, the hypocrites who had caused all of this fight to happen. But both sides were okay with it. The martyrs of Karbala, 6 of Ali radiallahu anhu's children were martyred. So that was Hussein, Ja'far, Abbas, who was the flag bearer, Muhammad, Uthman, and Abu Bakr. 2 of Hussein's children were martyred. That was Ali Akbar and Abdullah. 3 of Hassan radiallahu anhu's children were martyred. One was Abdullah, Qasim, and Abu Bakr. 2 of Abdullah ibn Ja'far's children were martyred, and that was Aoun and Muhammad. 4 of Aqil ibn Abi Talib's children were martyred. So one was Ja'far, Abdullah, Abdul Rahman, and Muslim ibn Aqil, obviously, who was martyred before the incident of Karbala alone. The date of Karbala is the 10th of Muharram, 61 AH, and Ibn Kathir, he recorded the same. All of them have said that it's the 10th of Muharram, and Ibn Kathir, he mentions that it was the day being a Friday. His age, I'm whizzing through it, so sorry if I'm going too fast. But the age of Sayyidina Hussein radiallahu anhu at the time was 56 years of age. And again, this is the correct view, although there are other views of this, but according to Sunni, this is what everyone has said. The killers, this is important now. So I'm going to just spend a bit of time on the killers and sort of what the end is, and then I think I'm going to skip and we're going to have to end it because I'm conscious we haven't prayed Salat al-Asr as well. So very quickly, the killers, who they were. So Sinan ibn Anas al-Nakha'i, Shamar and the Jawshan, which is Abu Zabliga, and Khawla ibn Yazid Asbahi. In the end, actually, I've mentioned it at the end. Just want to talk about the people, what happens to them. the ending, how it sort of, the ending had come. Let me just, okay, I just want to mention about Hussein radiallahu anhu, actually, so that it's a bit gruesome, so but I'll touch upon it. Hussein radiallahu anhu, the final blow was given by Shimr ibn Dhal Joshan, and he basically, Hussein radiallahu anhu's head was decapitated, and subhanallah, it was put on a plate and it was taken to Ibn Ziyad. And Ibn Ziyad, he took a stick, and Allahu Akbar, he was poking at the face of Hussein radiallahu anhu. And it was at that time, the Sahaba that were there, they stood up and they said, this is the same. It is said that the features of Hussein radiallahu anhu, it was more closer to the same features of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it is said that as he was poking, the Sahaba was saying, these are the same lips the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam kissed. It's the same head, the same skin, the same ears that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had killed. So again, I'm just conscious of the audience, and I'm not sure how many people, youngsters there, but do go away and do study about it. And wallahi, it really hurts. It's really painful. The pain that we feel, it's what makes us true Shi'as. And this is why I say that we are the Shi'as, we are the true Shi'as of Ali radiallahu anhu, Shi'atu Ali. We are the true Shi'atu Ali. Khair, just on a side note here as well, the Shi'as that we know of today, the Shi'atu Ali was there from before, but it was a political party. And in 60, and Ali radiallahu anhu, Hussein radiallahu anhu, Shi'atu Hussein radiallahu anhu passed away in 61 AH. And the theological side began in 65 AH, 65 Hijri, 4 years after his death. Okay? And another point here is that the people, they were known as, this was a group that came out known as Tawwabun, and they were the repenters, and they were obviously felt, the people of Kufa, they felt guilty of what happened and the betrayal, and they came out to Karbala, and then obviously they went, the grave was there, and then they started to beat themselves and etc. And that's where it all starts from. But the Shia to Ali, we actually are more closer and deserving of this than anybody else. Coming back to the point of the evil end, what happens to them. So remember what Ibn Ziyad did to Hussein radiallahu anhu. So Umar ibn Sa'ad, he was the leader of the army at Karbala. So Mukhtar al-Thaqafi, Mukhtar was the one that killed Umar ibn Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, his son Hafs ibn Sa'ad, and the other comrades. And this is again all mentioned. Like I said, I'm just referencing it for you, so go away and have a look at it. It's mentioned by Ibn Kathir in Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya. What happens to Shamar ibn Doshan is that he was the head of the battalion, he was the commander, and which actually his battalion was the one that carried out the killing of Sayyidina Hussein radiallahu anhu. And so Mukhtar al-Thaqafi hunted him down and he killed him as well. And Ibn Yazid, he was responsible for severing the blessed head of Sayyidina Hussein. And so Mukhtar al-Thaqafi sent his army after him, and they eventually tracked him down and they killed him outside his own family house. Now, in regards to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad, who did all of this stuff in the palace, it is said that in 67 AH, Mukhtar ibn Abi Ubaidullah al-Thaqafi, he prepared an army of 8,000 men, and he dispatched them under the leadership of Ibrahim Ashtar al-Nakha'i. And they came face to face with Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad in Mosul, in Iraq. And a major battle took place known as Waqa'atu Khazir, in which Ibn Ziyad and others were killed. And it is said that, Sunnatullah, whatever, we say that whatever goes around comes around. And it is said that Mukhtar al-Thaqafi, when the army killed when the army when they killed him, it happened to be, they didn't do it on purpose, it happened to be that his head was severed, and it was put on a plate, and it was brought to Mukhtar al-Thaqafi. And subhanallah, it is said that whilst his head was put on the ground, a snake comes, and subhanallah, out of nowhere, it goes into his nose and it sits in his brain. Allahu Akbar. This was the gruesome end of those people who did what they did to Hussein radiallahu anhu in terms of the massacre. After this tragedy had ended, after the tragedy of Karbala, Zainul Abidin, now this is an interesting part, but again, conscious of time, so you go away and have a look at it. For those of you that don't know, Zainul Abidin, his real name is Ali. And Zainul Abidin was the son of Hussein radiallahu anhu, so ultimately the grandson of Ali radiallahu anhu. So Zainul Abidin, his real name is Ali. So Ali bin Hussein bin Ali. And Zainul Abidin was the only living male of the Ahlul Bayt that remained. And what happened was he only got saved because on that day he had a very high fever and he was in the tent with the women and the children. And that's the only way he had got away with it. And I'm just going to end on this. And I think, like I said, I sincerely apologize that we can't go away and have a look at this in sort of any more detail. But I will just talk about some of the lessons that we sort of take away from this. The first thing is in regards to Salah, the importance of Salah. Why we talk about Salah in this particular particular sense is that at such a time of Karbala, Sayyidina Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he punctually carried out his ibadat, and he tried his best not to allow any of his salahs to be missed. The historians, they give some account of the different stages of this, where in one historian writes that Hussein radiallahu anhu and the companions passed the night of Karbala engrossed in performing salah, in istighfar, in supplicating, and displaying humility before Allah Azza wa Jalla. And whilst the horses of the opposition were encircling them, they were going around, but they continued in ibadah. And then there's another commentary made by another historian. It says that Hussein radiallahu anhu led his companions in salah on the battlefield, and they were 32 cavalry and 40 infantry. So just by fulfilling these commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at such a critical and difficult moment, these great personalities have shown that a practical example of how important salah is in Islam, and that under no circumstances will it ever be waived, and that we as Muslims should take lesson from them. SubhanAllah, we live at a time when salah, it becomes secondary, and it's just so important for us that just see they're on the battlefield, and we see about the history, we see it, but just look at the juncture, that time, subhanallah, that was the most important thing for them to do. Another important lesson that we take away is that to pay off debts. Ibn Abi Shayba, he records this in the history, that from Abu Musa ibn Umair and then from his father, that Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhu, after realizing that there was going to be a sort of a confrontation, and that there was going to be a fighting with the opposition, and there was no way out, for example, he told a person to announce that any person who has an outstanding debt should not join us in the fight. SubhanAllah. That if you die and you have a debt upon you, who's going to pay my debt? And so a person says that my wife has given the guarantee that she will pay off my debts. And Hussein radiallahu anhu remakes that what guarantee is the guarantee of of your wife, and the person didn't participate in that, because your debt, it's your debt, and it's important that you pay your debt. And this announcement of Sayyidina Hussein radiallahu anhu was in sort of that, was in a way that he was saying that it was a way that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would say, that is mentioned in a hadith, that all the sins of a martyr are forgiven except debts. So al-qatlu fi sabilillah yakfuru kullu shay'in illa ad-dayn, that martyrdom is the path of Allah, and it expiates all sins except debts. And the reason why, again, I draw to this, that subhanallah, we live at an era, we live at a time where any person you talk to, I've got debts, we're struggling. And I understand, subhanAllah, we have with living standards and the cost of living, but it is so important. Mental health, the impact it can have on this person. And brother Abdul Hay mentioned about it. It's so important when you, as counselors, when we talk to people, the impact this debt can have on a person. It eats away because you never ever come out of a debt. So paying off your debts is so important. And if you are struggling, find a way, find a method of coming past that, coming out of that debt, inshallah. Another lesson that we take away is about ghulu, extremism. Subhanallah, we see it especially at this time of this month. People in the love of Hussein radiallahu anhu and Ahlul Bayt, they go into the extreme. So abstaining from ghulu, the Yahya ibn Sa'di says that Ali ibn Hussein radiallahu anhu, this is Zain al-Abidin, was the best from amongst the Hashemites in his time, because remember, he's the only one that survived. So he used to say, love us for the sake of Islam, and if you exceed the limits in loving us, it will turn into a blemish for us. He once said that, oh people, have love for us as per the dictates of Islam. By Allah, by exceeding in the limits in the love you in your love for us, you are disgracing us, and people thereby will begin to hate us because of the high extreme you have. And so again, it's so important that you give the rank of the person that they deserve. Don't go into too much ghulu, too much extremism, which again is what we see that's happening, and it's totally against this. Zain al-Abidin is from the Ahlul Bayt, and he's saying this. And so what the people do and the actions and the things that they do is totally against the advice of Islam. Then also about mourning in Islam, the command is to adopt patience, and Islam prohibits of wailing. The ruling is quite clear that in times of difficulty, a person should adopt patience and abstain from all types of complaints and despair. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sta'inu bis-sabri was-salah, inna Allaha ma'as sabirin, that all you have believed, seek help through patience and through salah, through prayer. Indeed, Allah is with the patient one. And again, just about sort of the history around wailing. Ibn Kathir, he writes in sort of Bidayah wa Nihaya that on the 10th of Muharram in the year 352 AH, Mu'az al-Dawla ibn Buyo, he instructed the people of Baghdad to close the markets and the businesses, and the women to wear sack-type woolen clothes and walk through the marketplaces bareheaded, unveiled with their hair loose, slapping their faces and wailing over the death of Hussein ibn Abi Talib radiallahu. Hussein ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu. The Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah were not able to prevent this due to the Shia majority and their authority and the Sultan being amongst them. So it is this wailing, this mourning that we see, it was never done straight away from that time. It was done in 352. And again, Ibn Kathir rahimahullah mentions about this. And on this, we're just going to end just by I'm not sure if does anyone do we, because I'm just very conscious of time and we haven't prayed Salat al-Asr as well, but I will be more than happy to pick up any sort of questions offline and come back. And if there is, if you want to do another one, inshallah, we can set one and we'll do one particular area of Karbala. And again, lastly, I do apologize to brothers and sisters that I've tried to rush through it, and it is indeed a massive information overload. Subhanallah bihamdi, subhanakallahumma bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. For that, if you don't mind, just one question. You know how you mentioned we are the true Shia to Ali. Just to clarify that, because we have people who are not quite aware what you meant by that. So just that point, inshallah, and then we can.
Okay, so the Shia to Ali was a political movement. Shia to Ali was a political movement before the theology side came in. So we oppose the theology of it. The theology of it came in 65 Hijri, and before that it was a political group. And so we were always aligned to the political group. We were never and the Shia that we know of today, that is a theology side of it. But Ahlul Sunni, the Sunnis were always, and they were never against the Shia of the political, the Shia to Ali, the political group, we were never against it. And it is the theology side is where we have disputes with them.
Jazakallah khair for that, Shaykh. alhamdulillah, you've given us a lot of your time and passing on a lot of knowledge, which I'm sure many of us have greatly benefited from. So, jazakallah khair to yourself and to the audience who have attended, mashallah. May Allah accept from us and increase us in knowledge. Just once again, do subscribe to our website or on our social media. Follow us, inshallah, for future events. Inshallah, I'm hoping to have Shaykh on more regularly. This is the first event that he's done for us, but inshallah, we'll be seeing more of him, inshallah. And don't forget as well, if you do want to contribute towards our charitable projects, you can do Sadaqah Jari on behalf of the Ahlul Bayt as well. Inshallah, you can do that. The admin will post the link. So anything you can contribute. We are in the days of Muharram, blessed month indeed. So please do keep us in your du'as, inshallah. May Allah accept from all of us and yourselves as well, inshallah. جزاكم الله خيرا سبحان الله وبحمده سبحانك اللهم نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته